you to the spring membership meeting. I didn't know a year ago that we'd be having our second membership meeting in a row online, but here we find ourselves, and we've got a pretty full agenda for tonight. So I know there's still some people checking in, but we'll go ahead and get started. This meeting is going to be recorded, and we will post a recording of tonight's meeting on Facebook. Couple of just helpful tips for participating in tonight's meeting. If you run your cursor at the top of your screen, it should open up a window or a panel bar that has a Q&A and a chat option. You can use those for asking a question. We have people monitoring the chat that will help us with questions, but this is the easiest way for us to facilitate having the meeting online. We've got a lot to cover this evening. We have a few administrative items. We have approval of our minutes from our last meeting, which have been posted online, and our treasurer's report. I'm also very excited that we have representatives from the city's Department of Public Works to talk to us about walkability and the Cedar Park Road sidewalk project. Fellow board member Joe Flasher is going to talk to us about the results of the community survey. And then board members Grant Garcia and Lizzie Quello are going to talk to us about some proposed capital investments. We'll wrap up tonight's meeting by talking about how we're going to conduct board elections because we're meeting remotely. And like we always do, we're going to conclude our meeting with updates from City Hall with our local councilman, Alderman Payon. But before we dive in, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on everything we've done, despite it being a year of social distancing, and a lot of challenges. We've really come together as a community and we've accomplished quite a lot. We've built new racks at Dewey Park, extending our kayak rack operation. We've replaced the dock at Williams Drive. Lizzie's kicked off a new family event with our scarecrow making event, which I hope to see come back. And we even arranged for socially distant Santa visits. But what I'm most proud of is for the first time in a long time, we've been able to get the Cedar Park sidewalk into the Annapolis capital budget. As I shared in the newsletter and as I shared with the board, at the end of this term, I'm looking to step down as president of the Admiral Heights Improvement Association. And so if you'll permit me for a moment, I just want to say thank you. First, thank you to the board who makes this job very easy. We've got tremendous dedicated volunteers who give of their time and talent to make everything happen. Especially want to thank Martha Thorne, who is probably our longest serving board member and who quietly, constantly drives us forward. But I also want to thank the neighborhood. We've tackled a lot of tough issues over the past 2 years, whether it was how to replace the Williams Drive dock, or even the conversation of whether a special benefits district was for us. And we took every one of those conversations seriously. We came together, we talked about what was possible, we talked about what was important, and we made real progress. I really like to think that we came out of these challenges and the challenges of COVID stronger. I'm also constantly reminded that what makes Admiral Heights great isn't even necessarily the Improvement Association. A lot of it's driven by our spirit of community. The events that I highlighted on this slide were all driven by AHIA, but there were also events in our community that were just driven by neighbors caring. I'm thinking about Wendy and Liz, who did the porch photo sessions that allowed us to meet so many of our neighbors during a time of staying at home. I'm thinking about Karma and the Lights in the Heights gingerbread run, and our neighbors that organized a food drive. So I want to thank you for everything you do to make Admiral Heights great. It's really been my pleasure to serve in this role, and I look forward to continuing to serve on the board, but I also look forward to creating an opportunity for a new voice to lead Admiral Heights. So with that, I want to jump into our first administrative matter, and that's the approval of the minutes. We've shared the minutes with you online. What we're going to do, because voting is not as easily conducted in a remote meeting, is we're going to seek unanimous consent on approval of the minutes. How we're going to do that is we're going to ask that if any member in good standing objects to the approval of the minutes, they either enter their objection in the chat tonight, or they file an objection by emailing president@admiralheights.org prior to 7 p.m. on March 3rd. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our treasurer, John Leupold, for the treasurer's report.
Okay, hopefully my audio is working this time. Yep,
Uh,
you're good.
okay, wonderful. Okay, so a couple key points here regarding the treasurer's report. So far, we're a little over 140 neighbors have paid for 2021, which is off to a great start considering we're only just a little over 2 months in to our new fiscal year. So based on last year's membership, which was pretty high, and where we're tracking so far, I think we're on track to hit our better case budget, which, if you recall from the October meeting, allowed us a little more freedom in terms of potential social events. Obviously, that's dependent on the state of COVID and restrictions and things like that. Um, but we are moving slightly towards our better case budget, which is also why we're talking about having some sort of a capital expenditure, which will come up later on in the meeting. Um, if you haven't noticed already, there's been a few changes on the website that have happened. First off, you can now subscribe to pay your dues via PayPal, which means every year you can set it up to automatically pay, so you don't have to think about it anymore. It's a great way if you don't like thinking about it, just to make sure it automatically happens for you. Um, Another thing is there is a new web page now that automatically updates anytime I log someone as having paid their dues. So it'll look a lot like the page off the or that you've seen in the newsletter the last couple of times, where it's just a last name followed by a street name there. So you can um, see if you've checked. You can check there to see if you've paid your dues or not. And like I said, that does get updated automatically as people are checked in as having paid their dues. Um, a couple of things coming up this year. You'll see. I'm not sure what happened to the slides there, but you'll see in a minute um, our current state of things. We don't have a lot of expenses yet this year because obviously not much has happened yet. We're in the midst of renewing our landscaping contract, which includes adding a bit more investment into the Porter Circle. So not only does it include what it has in the past, which is the big parks, but we're also including a little more work around the Porter Circle, as well as the or the neighborhood signs that you see on Halsey and when you come into the neighborhood on Farragut. So that will be a slightly higher expense. But like I said, 2020 ended with a bit of a surplus. We obviously didn't have very many social events because of COVID, but we did have a couple of increased property expenses. Like obviously the dock replacement was a big one. We built some new kayak racks, which will also be offset by more revenue. And some trees had to be removed down by the dock as well that were dead. Um, so if we could go to the next slide here. There it is. Hopefully you can all read that again. That's not a lot has happened this year yet, to be honest. Over on the left side of the screen, you can see our balance sheets there. The dock rebuild checking is growing, and it should keep growing every year as we make contributions and the boat club makes contributions. Obviously, it was down very low there right after the replacement, but it'll start going up, and hopefully every report it will be a little bit higher. Our CD is still right around $5,000. The CD rate was not very good when we renewed, and our general checking right now has around $20,000 in it. Over on the right side, you can see the numbers we had put in for the budget versus the current estimates. We had a lot more advertising dollars come in this time around. You may have noticed the last couple of newsletters. Cindy on our board has done a great job of getting some advertisers from local restaurants and businesses to be in the newsletter. So that's increased our revenue there a little bit. And like I said, we're off to a pretty good start in terms of dues. We've also had a fair number of donations come in this year already to the association, which is great. And we greatly appreciate all the neighbors who have decided to make a donation to our operating budget. So with that, I guess, are there any questions?
Just a reminder, if you have questions, there's a chat function and a Q&A function that you can use. John, I don't see any questions coming in right now, so we'll keep going. And if you have a question to enter, we can always circle back to it at the end of the meeting. So again, if you have questions about the treasurer's report, please use that chat function or the Q&A function. I'm very excited for us to now talk about the Cedar Park Road sidewalk project. And we have two guests from the Department of Public Works who are here to speak with us. If they would unmute themselves and come on camera, if they can. I just wanted to kick this off by showing a map where you see green, that is the existing Emerald Heights or sidewalk in the upper part of Emerald Heights. The blue, red, and yellow sections are where sidewalk is missing. And we're very excited that this has been put in the capital project or capital budget for the first time. So with that, our guests from DPW are Jennifer Spite and one of her colleagues. And I think I need to, let's see. One moment, apologies, folks. They were online. I see Sam Bryce. Sam, Jennifer, can you hear me? Can you connect?
Hey, Sam, we see you talking, but unfortunately, I don't think we hear you.
All right. Let's see. Well, now's a perfect time if we want to go ahead and enter questions into the chat ahead of time. We can add questions to the chat while Sam figures out his audio.
Hey, Scott, I'm also happy to do the survey results if we want that. It'll take a little bit if we want to.
Yeah, let's do that. I just didn't want to jump too far ahead in case they had to leave the meeting early, but why don't we move forward to the survey results, and then we'll get back to Cedar Park Road sidewalk once Sam's able to join audio.
Great, sounds good. I think you all can see me. Hey, everyone. Yeah, so this is the first time that we had done the survey. Thank you, everyone, for submitting responses. There are about 47 respondents, and I think there are about 47 participants on the Zoom right now. So I think there's probably a good, fairly large one-to-one correspondence there. So as we said at the time when we put out the survey, this is a way that we're trying to get feedback from the community on what would be most useful to all of you, and try to do that in a systematic way so we can sort of set priorities throughout the year. So again, thank you for filling this out as we try out this mechanism. So I just wanted to go through some of the results, and these were in the newsletter as well. And so this is just basically a summary of the results from the survey. So we had asked what your primary concerns were. There's a pretty clear winner in this one, and that was upkeep and beautification of community properties. So there's a pretty clear signal there, pretty far ahead of the other options. So noted. I think that's the thing that we've done, and we'll look to continue to do. We asked for interest in certain projects, so we had given a list of a few projects. So this one was a much more even answer field with a slight ordering. If we sort of added up sort of first and second concerns, because you could rank them. There's a slight ordering of improve appearance of Porter Road Circle, and then develop Halsey Park Playground. There were other suggestions for playground locations, but that had come up a couple of times. And then and finally add a neighborhood informational sign. So this, I think, broadly what the thought here is a sign somewhere in the neighborhood where people could post information or see information that was posted there by others. So much closer. I don't know that there is really a strong winner there, just sort of the slight ordering. And so some work was done on sort of looking into a number of those items. So we also asked sort of what should we continue doing? What are we not doing that we should be doing? What should we stop doing? And these were much more free form answers. So I just wanted to call out a few sort of key themes that we saw there. For the things that we should continue doing, we got a lot of nice feedback. I will say it made me feel very nice, which was good. So thank you everyone for saying these nice things. But basically, when there's communication, it's very thoughtful, respectful, reasonable. We should keep sharing the meetings virtually, soliciting feedback like this. Obviously, I think some of the virtual meetings were forced by the pandemic, but it looked like there was a desire to continue with that even after we might be able to meet in person. The community found interest in keeping up with local officials and having us act as a liaison between the city and the neighborhood. So noted, and I think that'll be coming up right after this as well. And then keeping up with landscaping and preservation efforts at the waterfronts. So sort of taken more broadly, the landscaping and preservation efforts, they sort of go along with the primary concern that was noted, which was upkeep and beautification of community properties as well. So we also asked, what are we not doing that we should start doing? There was interest in a traffic calming campaign. So again, we'll hear about that shortly here. There were a number of folks that wanted to see more social options, specifically for adults, no kids. And there's actually a specific question of whether there's a social chair or committee for the neighborhood. So that's an open question. There's a concern around walkability. Again, we'll hear about that in a moment. But then there's also a specific comment around that there's no crosswalk at Schley Road and Farragut to get over to the stadium. And so there's some concern raised around that. And so I guess sort of the call out for us is to try and figure out how to help raise that with the city. And then there's a call out, and I think this goes a little bit with the social interactions, social options piece, more interaction on the Facebook group and social events where more people attend. There's also a comment to include alcohol and things for kids to partake in. I'm going to take those as two separate items and not alcohol for the kids. Yeah, so a number of folks wanted to see more social options, obviously been curtailed a little bit due to the pandemic, but sort of afterwards, a lot of folks looking for more social options, both online and in person. And then we just had a completely free form comment section. So there's a number of folks that thank you to the board. So thank you all. Some comments around playgrounds, either Halsey Park or at other locations around the neighborhood. And so there's a little bit of done work initially there. And then there's also a call out that we should have a green team for the neighborhood to sort of look at invasive plants around the neighborhood. So I think you'll see and sort of the issues we talk about here, but then also things that were covered in the newsletter that aren't going to fit within this meeting, that we've already sort of taken action on some of these items. So as I said, this is a key way that we're trying to figure out what's of interest to the community. And I hope to see us continue to do these in the future, because once we sort of did the initial setup, it's sort of easy to repeat them year over year and continue to get feedback. So I will see if there's any questions. There are not, so I'm happy to stop. Oh, there's something in the chat room here. So somebody put in the, so Ginny in the chat said, I suggested any plans for Halsey Park only be
I think it's
Oh,
undertaken.
right, sure, undertaken. Yeah, presumably after the neighbors to that parcel are respectively consulted. Sure, yes. And so I think Ginny's larger comment is that we should be respectful of the neighborhood and the nature around the properties and the folks around the properties, which, yes, for sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I saw Jennifer from DPW come on and unmute, and it looks like she has dropped again. Jennifer, are you still there? And Sam is away from his screen, it looks like.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you. There we go. All right, I'm going to walk us back to your slides. So Sam Bryce from DPW, and it looks like Jennifer is on as well, where I see a log on for Jennifer as well. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited that the Cedar Park Road sidewalk has made its way into the capital budget and look forward to learning more.
Okay, I've moved to a different computer since I couldn't get the one I was on to work. I'm going to give a brief introduction, and Jen has texted me and said that her internet keeps going in and out. So I'm going to give an introduction. If Jen can then take it from there, that's what will happen. If it doesn't work that way, then you're going to be stuck with me. So last year it was introduced into the capital budget to install a sidewalk along Cedar Park Road from Wendell up to just past Halsey, where there's an existing sidewalk that is able to be connected into. We have we're going to do this in two phases. One is going to be a temporary sidewalk, which we're going to put in using some of the existing materials we had left over from the bike path on Main Street, which are bumpers and flex posts to identify the sidewalk, so that we can get something in there in the immediate future. Funding is not really available at this point to do the entire sidewalk because the grant opportunity that they thought was there did not appear to be coming through as quickly as we had anticipated. Let me just ask, Jen, are you on, or should I continue? I'm going to interpret that as I should continue. So you got the backup guy here. We went out and we looked at the sidewalk and its location. One of the issues that we found was that the ground all slopes up for almost the entire length of the sidewalk to the up onto the private properties. So as we viewed it, in order to install the sidewalk behind the existing curb, it would become necessary to do some significant grading up onto private properties. Some of those would be very significant, cutting back maybe 10 to 15 feet on the properties and resulting in a very steep slope even at those lengths. So after we reviewed this, what we determined was that a better solution would be to install the actual sidewalk within the paved area of the street by installing a new curbing approximately 6 feet off of the existing curbing, and then installing a 5-foot sidewalk between the old curb and the new curb. What this would do is this would eliminate the parking on one side of the street, being the side where Fisk Circle and Ford Circle is located. And that would allow us to install the sidewalk. This may also have the added benefit of providing some traffic calming, because now the street will be narrower, and narrower streets tend to have slower traffic on it. Kind of looking at the slide that Jen prepared, where we I just talked about the parking being removed, and I also discussed the temporary walkway that would be installed, and this would provide the children as well as the adults with a safe walkway to get up to the school. Where we tied into driveways, we would install a new driveway aprons, and there may be some minor driveway adjustments that would be necessary. We would install the ADA truncated domes at the street crossings. They would not go at driveways, but they would go at the street crossings. So at Fisk and Ford and Circles, they would go in, and those are similar to what you see up at Wendell and along Cedar Park further up. We would do some storm drain inspection, and we make adjustments to accommodate the stormwater, and we would be doing some stormwater management practices along with the new curb line. So looking at the picture, you can kind of see the 5-foot sidewalk and where that would sit. And then if you unfortunately, you're kind of losing the rest of the of that detail that Jen put together. But what it's showing is the new curbing, which is about 8 inches wide. Then there's a 5-foot sidewalk behind that new curbing, and then there's the cutback into the slope to tie that in. And it says 2-to-1 or 4-to-1. It's probably going to be more like a 4-to-1 because we'll simply be tying into the existing grade. That's kind of what the scope of the project is.
So Sam, we do have a couple of questions, and I'll just start by commenting first. I think the point about traffic calming is really well made. We've had 2 single car accidents on that stretch. And so I know we've asked for a long time about speed bumps and stop signs, and it sounds like this is going to be the best solution that the traffic engineer can sign off on. So we do appreciate progress. The first question we had came from Chrissy Holt, and it was, how much was the grant for that we're now not going to get?
There was never a grant. There was a proposal that the way this could be funded would be through a grant. We had discussions with Anne Arundel, and I think it was somewhere around $300,000. And that's what is sticking in my memory. I could be wrong about this.
Sam, we were only asking for $250, I think.
Okay.
And we did not actually have the match funds in the current CIP budget, so we had to ask for additional funding as well.
I will turn this over to Jennifer. Jennifer is one of our engineers. She now runs, I used to run the paving program. She now runs the paving program as well as the sidewalk program. So I will turn it over to Jen. If we lose her, I will try to jump back in and try to finish this out. But again, what Jen had texted me was that she was having internet problems.
I called in. I think I'm all right now.
So Jen, the next question we have comes from our neighbor, Nina Fisher. What stormwater practices will be used for new curbs?
So the stormwater is going to be done after the completion of the entire segment. We're working with we actually contracted with an engineering team to come up with a couple of practices. So we're considering placing it down where our pump station is, but that is still under review at this time.
And I have one last question, not necessarily related to this project, but hopefully you or Sam can give us some insight. Natalie Ketchum asks about the Poplar Trail and the extension to Route 2, if there's any update on that project.
Let's see. I believe the county is coming out with their findings. We're working with them. But other than that, I don't think that their study has actually been published. And that's the connection we're calling the Outer We, I believe, is what the question's regarding. I don't believe it is funded at this time, and I believe that the mayor is going after another grant.
Great. Just a reminder, if you do have a question about the Cedar Park Road sidewalk, you can submit it using the chat function or the Q&A function. we'll just give everybody a moment to see if there are any other lingering questions.
Let me also add something about the grant possibilities. We had discussions with Anne Arundel, or Jen actually had discussions with Anne Arundel County about the potential for a grant. And one of the issues you always get into with grants is how much effort does it take to get the grant, and how much is it going to cost you to get the grant. This particular grant has a tendency to be extremely time-consuming as well as costly. I think Anne Arundel County said something along the lines of, if you're not going for $500,000, it really isn't. It's really too difficult to get for the time and effort you're going to spend. It's also a competitive grant, so you could spend the time and never get the grant. Jen, did I cover that, or do you want to add something?
Nope, that pretty much covered it. And the amounts that we were requesting, they usually go for big ticket items, which I think this is a big ticket item, but upwards of $1 million plus is usually what is provided. We would have to get 100% design plans prior to submitting for the construction portion. So we would have been using up all of the match and had to request more as well.
Right.
So.
We have similar questions coming in from our neighbors, Bo and Rod, related to the timing of the phases. Can you give us an idea of when you anticipate the temporary sidewalk phase 1 will be installed, and then how long it'll take to get to phase 2, the installation of a permanent sidewalk?
Sure. Well, the mayor is extremely passionate about this project, and I think we're going to put in a big effort to install all of the phases temporarily in April. So I'm working on figuring out how many temporary structures we need to procure. We do have a lot already in Public Works. And I think Sam had mentioned that the segments are going to go from street to street. So I think the temporary is going to take probably a week to 2 weeks to install. Again, it depends on supplies and availability of our crews. The second part is going to depend on funding. We won't start a segment without reaching another street. So as the funding becomes available, it will take, I think, a month to do each of the different segments, weather pending. This work is very susceptible to rain and temperatures. So we're just going to have to keep you guys posted, and I'll make sure that I'm reaching out to all the homeowners, considering their driveways are going to be impacted, traffic's going to be impacted. We'll make sure that you're aware of what's coming. I wish I had better dates.
And we got another question coming in. The sidewalks are great, but kids will still need to cross Wendell to get to school. Is there a plan for a 3-way stop sign at the intersection of Wendell and Cedar Park?
No, not as a part of this project at this time. And I believe this has been asked before. And I think our traffic engineer has already said that this is not an applicable situation. So we would have to run it through the program after the state of emergency is lifted to see if it warrants another stop sign.
Great. Yeah, I can confirm that I know Admiral Heights Improvement Association's placed several requests for a stop sign there. That's actually part of what got us to the sidewalk conversation, because the stop sign and speed bumps kept getting denied. The fear that I'm hearing from the traffic engineer is that because the stop sign's not warranted under the formula, they're afraid people would just run the stop sign.
Yep, that's why we hold national standards. They're not put in for speed, and they are definitely have to be warranted before we put them in. So in speed bumps, I'm sure that you guys have brought this up before, but the city actually doesn't do speed bumps. It's not one of our practices.
So we have a couple follow-up questions on phase 2, and I'm paraphrasing here. I believe your answer has been that phase 2 will be implemented as funding becomes available and as we can complete to a cross street. But the question that's been asked here is, if funding is not received, is there a point where the temporary sidewalks will be removed? So if funding's not available, let's say within a year, would the temporary sidewalks be removed, or is the city's plan to keep them in place as long as they are working and until phase 2 can be implemented?
I believe the plan is to keep them in until everything is implemented. Unless I'm told otherwise, but I know the mayor is very adamant that this project goes forward. So we will keep them and maintain them for as long as necessary.
Great.
Sam, is that right?
That is my understanding, and
Me too.
and it's an issue of when funding would be allocated.
Our neighbor Sean O'Neill asks, has there been any type of survey or analysis on how many cars currently park on Cedar Park Road that will be affected?
No, I have not done that analysis.
But I would add that as I recall, every house on Cedar Park Road has a driveway to park in. So.
And I'd say I have walked up and down there, especially with the pandemic. It's one of my walking routes. Usually see about 10 to 15 cars. But that's in the middle of the day. I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot more in the evening.
Neighbor Derek asks or says, I know speed bumps won't happen. What about islands like they have? I think he means the islands that are on Poplar as it's approaching Wendell as a traffic calming measure.
At the moment, there is no traffic calming needed. We ran a couple, I'm just looking at our history here in our files, and it looks like we did a couple of speeding studies, and nothing is warranted in this area. We're hoping that the traffic calming will be achieved with the sidewalks, but any additional practices are not going to, are not currently happening with this capital improvement project.
I think the other thing that would go with, for example, putting in islands or chicanes, which is what we've got over on Poplar, would go with that is you would lose additional parking along Cedar Park if you installed those, because what's going to happen is this is going to get narrowed down to effectively 2 lanes and a parking lane. If you want to install islands or chicanes, that is just going to further reduce the width and probably necessitate the removal of parking on the opposite side of the street.
Oh, and Sam, did you mention we're gonna stripe the parking as well to make sure that all the cars stay within the parking area to avoid additional incidents?
I did not mention that.
Okay, that is also a part of the scope.
All right. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments come in. One more comment actually about how it's on us to drive slower to make these roads safer. And I'll just echo that traffic studies have shown actually by and large, folks are following the speed limit, but the reality is 25 miles per hour is pretty fast on some of these small residential roads, particularly when kids are playing. So it is on all of us to make sure that we're good neighbors by driving responsibly. One more question did creep in, and that is, in the back of our neighborhood where there are sidewalks and very steep elevations, uphill houses have retaining walls. Was that a consideration as opposed to grading?
I will kind of answer that. When you get into the cost of retaining walls, it just skyrockets these prices. You know, you have problems down at Bristol because of the adjacent grading. It just becomes very, very costly. But even where we see the picture that Jen has here, which is before you get to Bristol, if you were to set that sidewalk behind the existing curb, that the back of the sidewalk would probably be about 2 feet in the ground, which would mean that you would be grading back another 5, 6, 7 feet to get a more reasonable slope for an urban environment. You start cutting back that far, you start to get into the tree roots. So as you get up, as you see that next tree up, we'll be cutting back up into those tree roots, which I don't think anyone wants us to do, as well as taking out any landscaping you've got immediately adjacent to the roadway. And by immediately adjacent, I mean probably within, again, 5 to 10 feet.
I think in some cases we would have ended up in people's pretty much at their front porches.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Sam and Jennifer, thank you for joining us this evening. Walkability has certainly been very important to me and certainly very important to the neighborhood. Lots more to do in our neighborhood. I know Farragut is equally challenging, but Cedar Park Road has been a cause of concern for a number of us. And I appreciate that we've been able to move from conversation to real results, and that in April we'll see a temporary sidewalk being installed. I appreciate you taking the time. And so on behalf of all of our neighbors here in Emerald Heights, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, Joe's already taken care of the community survey results for us. So we're going to move ahead to 2 proposed capital investments. The total package is $7,500. And I'm going to ask Lizzie Quello first to talk about her thoughts for how we can improve the Cedar Park sign location.
Hello, everyone. Oh, here's the video. So I'm holding a baby. So a few months ago, the AHIA board, we discussed different areas in the community that we thought might benefit from some capital investment. And one of those spaces was the Cedar Park community space. So it's right on Cedar Park, right after the entrance sign. So behind the entrance sign. And it's sort of a strangely shaped property. So it's triangular. It's not super deep, but it's very long. It takes up, you know, like what would be a few different house fronts. So there's not like so much that we could do with that space. We talked about the possibility of like a playground, but I think that was nixed because of that it's not very deep. We wouldn't be able to set it back too far from the road. So an idea that I had is I live on Cedar Park and I see a lot of people and kids walk by and I do see people stop at that area, but it's, you know, it's a nice little community space and sort of an inexpensive way to add to that, sorry, everyone, would be maybe to add a couple of benches there, maybe a little free library. And if some of you have seen, like if you ever walk along the Poplar, oops, oh no. Oh.
We're still connected.
Sorry, I got it. Okay, if you ever, hold on just a second. Sir, can you take the baby for a second? Okay, sorry, it's bedtime and anyway, is if you ever walked along the Poplar Trail, you may have noticed that they have a community bulletin board and they post, I don't know, like just community events, like community engagement. I imagine if we did something like that here, people could post about, I don't know, is another way that a lot of us use Facebook to interact with different members in the community through our Facebook page. But, you know, if people are walking along, they could post things there. It might be just another way that we could meet or reach out to community members. And we do have a little free library. So I see that there's a lot of turnover of the books that we have and we regularly visit. I have 4 kids. We regularly visit the other little free libraries in the neighborhood. And you know, it's just another way that like sort of a more inexpensive way that we could beautify that area and just make it a more community friendly space. Anyway, so I'm open to ideas. That's just one of the ideas that we had discussed and some of the things that I'd come up with. Obviously, price will depend on a variety of factors. You know, I've looked at prices of like teak benches versus metal benches. There's the price differentiation there. And then, you know, like how many benches we want to do, if we did 2 or 4, however that, you know, works out. So that this investment could be, I would say, as little as maybe like $1,500 to $2,000 or up, depending on how much we are wanting to invest into that space. So that was just an idea there.
Thanks, Lizzie. No questions yet, but we did get some positive feedback from our neighbors. Amy, who thinks it would be great, especially once there's a sidewalk to make it safe, and Siobhan, who thinks the benches idea is fabulous. I also know we've been using that space. You started the first event there with the scarecrow making event, so it's been a nice little spot for folks to gather. Grant, can you talk to us for a moment about the needs for redecking on the Dewey Drive dock? And for those of you that don't know, Grant for a long time served as the property committee chair for Admiral Heights and did a lot of these improvements himself on the Dewey dock. So Grant, thank you first for that. What are we thinking for Dewey dock?
Thanks, Scott. So we've talked over the last couple of years on the board about the eventually needed, and I think we're getting there, if not there already, the need to redeck Dewey Dock. If you are down there, you'll notice sort of a patchwork of replacements. We go in periodically, pull a 2x8, cut one, put a new one down. We are adding screws many times a year, and what we're losing the opportunity to do, and I think that if you look at the good 3/4 of that dock that is splintered up and rotting, is that we are losing the opportunity when we replace it one board at a time to really get in there and do the preventative long-term care on the stringers. And so I think we're there. It's the opportunity, the time to do it is near. And we've had one of the best companies come out that does dock building in Annapolis, and their plan would be to pull all the old 2x8s out and go through and treat the top of the stringers. They do it with tar, and that'll give it almost a new lease on life, and then put down the new deck boards. The deck boards were, I think many people probably remember, this dock was rebuilt in the beginning of '04 when after Isabel, and so we're on year 17 of the deck boards. I think we've gotten a good run out of them with their really in the sun almost all day, and no reason to expect that if we don't if we redeck it properly now, we put another 17 years and maybe beyond that as well. So we have a quote. The board has obtained a quote for Scott. Is it okay if I put the number out there? Or
yeah.
Okay, we have a quote for $5,500 for them to come in and redeck the whole dock, and we will certainly. That's one quote, and we will certainly get a second quote before we move forward as a board. But that's, I think, a good rough number from a reputable firm.
Thanks, Grant. So we're comfortable we can accomplish both of these projects within 7,500. Because of the nature of online meetings, we are going to seek unanimous consent for this. So if there's any objection to the board proceeding with these plans, please enter your objection in the chat, or feel free to email it to president@admiralheights.org by 7 p.m. tomorrow. And if there's an objection, then this will wait until we can meet in person and have a formal facilitated vote. Just a couple of comments and questions coming in on the chat. It looks like our neighbor Chip Wright's a member of the Rotary Club of Annapolis, and they've begun a little library project in several communities. He wanted to know if Admiral Heights would be interested in joining those efforts. Absolutely. Our email addresses are on the website. You can always email me at president@admiralheights.org. I'll connect you with Lizzie, who's been our champion for that project, but that is definitely something that we would be interested in. Lauren Heyer writes, would a little pavilion for Cedar Park work, or a couple of wood benches? She'd love to see food trucks in that area or at the pool. We would definitely have to talk with the city about what could be accomplished there with the setbacks on that lot. Like Lizzie shared, it's a narrow triangle, so it's hard to put a lot of things there. We know we can get benches in. We've raised the conversation about food trucks in the past. The challenge I think that we've had with food trucks in the past on city streets is actually a city code requirement. What we'll have to do if we want food trucks is either work out something with the swim club to have them on their parking lot so they're on private property when the swim club's not in use, or we'll have to look at Admiral Heights getting a special events permit, and we'll host food trucks as part of that. But that is definitely something we can be looking into. One of our themes going into next year, I certainly think, is going to be trying to figure out how we have more social events. That's definitely something we've heard that people are interested in, and we're looking forward to responding to that, hopefully once vaccines are better distributed and it's safe to do so again. I don't see any more comments or remarks coming in, so we'll move to our next slide, which is board elections. One of the things that I'm really excited about as a measure of how connected we have become as a neighborhood over the past couple of years is that we have a record number of applicants to serve on the Admiral Heights Improvement Association board. We've come a long way in that regard. I remember the first Admiral Heights Improvement Association meeting I came to, we didn't even have candidates for all the board seats. So I'm very excited about that. We have our ballot online. You can access that ballot online by going to that link that I posted for you right there. We're asking for folks to cast their ballots by March 3rd at 7 p.m. And we're going to announce the results next week on Monday. Under our bylaws, the 2020 officers are automatically reelected to the board for 1 year. So that's myself as the president, Bo Conroy as the vice president, Cindy Radilovich as the secretary, and John Leupold as the treasurer. We'll count the ballots so that way we can make sure there is a fair election. We are still processing dues that have come in, and so that's why we're delaying our counting. We know the mail's been running a little bit slow. I think we got something like 30 dues checks today alone. So let's see. When you go on there, you are going to see on the ballot, it's going to ask for your name, address, and email address. That's how we're going to verify that your dues have been paid and you're a member in good standing. I really want to thank everybody that has volunteered to serve on the board. And I hope that even though we can't elect everybody to the board, that everybody will stay involved, because it takes a lot of hands to keep Admiral Heights Improvement Association running. We desperately need volunteers. So very excited to work with all of you next year. And with that, let's turn to updates from City Hall. I know I saw Alderman Payon on. I just want to make sure. Let's see. Fred, can you hear us? I think we have you off of mute.
I don't know what's going on. Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. What's going on at City Hall? There hasn't been a ton of things going on at City Hall because City Hall's been closed to the public since last March, but we are still meeting. We're meeting remotely and getting a few things done, I hope. The direct effect of most of what we are doing doesn't really reach out to Admiral Heights at this point, although indirectly just about everything we do does. We are, of course, following the sidewalk saga, if you will, very closely. One of the unfortunate things about the Improvement Association meeting this way, don't get me wrong, I'm delighted that we can do that, but there are a number of things that I wanted to comment on and add to when Sam and Jen were speaking, because I think I knew the answer to. But at any rate, the city is on it. I was fortunate enough to be able to get the mayor's attention and involvement, and they're absolutely right. The mayor is excited about this project. He really wants it to go through. The problem that we have is that we're already $3 million in the hole on this year's budget, and we're projected to go $10 million in the hole on next year's. Not a good outlook at the moment, but we're working on it. One of the things I'd like to know is what people think ought to be cut out of the 2022 budget. We may have to limit some services, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I hope it doesn't come down to that, but as long as the city priorities are what they are, we're going to have to come up with some money somehow. There is a project besides the sidewalk project that at least indirectly affects Admiral Heights. It affects our neighbors in West Annapolis a lot more, and that is the Tucker Street launch facility. There is a boat ramp at the end of Tucker Street that goes right into Weems Creek. Excuse me. And the city is totally redoing that this year. It's about a $350,000 project. There'll be, of course, the boat ramp. It'll be a much improved boat ramp. There will be kayak launching. I guess you don't really launch a kayak, but certainly kayaks and paddle boards, things like that, will be much more prominent at the end of Tucker Street. You will have to buy a permit to use it, but I think it's either $10 or $15 a year. There are some traffic issues over there. Actually, it's probably more accurate to say parking issues. However, we think that we can overcome them, and it'll be for the use of everybody that lives in the city. If you're not a member of the boat club or don't have a boat docked here, you're perfectly free to use that. You're perfectly free to use it now, but it will be a first-class facility by the time it gets built. I'm not sure what else to tell you. The Naval Academy, the NAAA, for obvious reasons, has been quite silent in terms of things that they're doing right now. I don't know if the NAAA got CARES money from the Trump administration or not. I suspect, knowing Chet Gladchuk, that they got every penny they possibly could, but they, I think, are not really, well, I'm not sure what their financial situation is right now, but I suspect it's not too good, because no matter how you look at it, missing 5 home games, that's a lot of moolah to take away from somebody. Are there any questions right now?
Fred, I don't see any questions coming in for you on the chat, but if you don't mind hanging out, I'm going to circle back to some questions that we had about the election. And if anybody types a question in the meantime, I'll get back to you. Is that all right?
Sure.
Thanks. I have a question in the Q&A function from Dan. Is there a way to get information about the people running for board seats? That is a great question. Our process is a little disjointed because we're not meeting in person, and we have some controlled access issues with the webinar. So what I'd like to encourage everybody to do that is running for the board is to just post a comment or a reply introducing yourself to the neighborhood on one of the meeting event posts or the election post. Actually, John, if you could create a Meet the Candidates post that the candidates could reply to on our Facebook page, that would be really great. And we'll use that for facilitating introductions, because not everybody has access to audio tonight.
Sure, I'll get that up in just a couple of minutes.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Just checking for questions one last time, and I don't see any other questions. Oh, hold on. There's a question about why can't we have more people on the board? It's really just a matter of we need to amend our bylaws to add more people on the board. We can certainly do that. We've not amended our bylaws because we've not had in-person meetings, and the bylaws actually have a process for amending them that we have to follow as a nonprofit corporation in the state of Maryland. But certainly we can look to add more seats to our board. And like I said, we really need more volunteers than just our board. So I'm hoping everybody will stay engaged and stay involved. And we'll look to amending bylaws, hopefully the next time we have an in-person meeting. To the follow-up question on that, can we expedite the process? We can expedite it within the limits of the bylaws. The thing that is required is that we have a quorum of the neighborhood present for a vote. And that's just something really hard to accomplish right now during COVID. So definitely we'll look to do that. We want to find as many ways to keep people involved in the neighborhood as possible. So hopefully we'll also be standing up some committees to help with these projects. I know there's lots of folks interested in social events, and hopefully we'll be able to get that going safely because the vaccine's being distributed. There's always need for help with some of the community grounds projects, whether it's greenscape or otherwise, our family-friendly events like Independence Day and the Halloween party. Really looking forward to seeing a lot of that return. And then even things like walkability. Walkability takes a lot of advocacy. We've been pretty tireless about that. I've been pretty proud at how far AHIA has pushed that issue. I think we're making really good progress on Cedar Park Road. I'm looking forward to us also having safer crossings on Farragut. I know that issue has come up several times, but it takes a lot of hands to do this. So we're always looking for volunteers. We'll keep looking for ways to engage volunteers, and hopefully this will be a good problem. We'll have lots of people interested in the board, and we'll be able to expand the size of the board. Fred, I don't see any questions coming in, but it looks like you've got something to say, and then we'll close out the meeting.
Yeah, I do put out a newsletter, agenda comments every 2 weeks before meetings. If you would like, anyone would like to get a copy of that, please send the request to me at aldpaone, one word, ALDPAONE @annapolis.gov, and give me your name and your email address. I send out, I don't know, it's been about 6 or 8 months, and I send one out before every meeting with my comments, and in addition to what the agenda is. And I have about 150 people or so that it's going to. I'd like to have a lot more. So by all means, contact me and I'll make sure you're included.
Thank you. I just put up the save the date for our one firm upcoming event. We know this one's going to happen. That's Greenscape on April 24th. We'll be involved social distancing. Please wear masks. Please bring trowels, shovels, gloves, and rakes as we take care of invasive ivy and we plant some new plants at the Dewey Dock. We are looking forward to being able to hopefully soon return to our normal social events to include the Independence Day Bike Parade, maybe even the Easter egg hunt. Maybe we'll be back to events by then. It's an election year, so we'll also be looking to host a Meet the Candidates Forum with the Homewood Germantown Association and West Annapolis are usually associations we join with. So you'll see more events coming out. Unfortunately, we've not firmly scheduled a lot of them because we just don't know what COVID's going to bring. So as we keep watching things, please look to your calendars. We'll send out notices when those events are going to occur, but we look forward to being able to get back together as a community. I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening and for participating in our meeting. And once again, I just want to say thank you to the volunteers on our board who have done such an amazing job, but to all of our neighbors who every day make Admiral Heights just a fantastic place to live. This is really a special place, and it's because each and every one of you contribute so much. So thank you. Have a great evening. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up by email. It's president@admiralheights.org. Thank you.